Welcome back to News in Focus. Hussam Al-Masri, Mohammed Salama, Mariam Abu Daka, and Muaz Abu Taha. Those were the 4 journalists that were brutally murdered by Israel today. More journalists continue to die as Israel's genocide in Gaza continues to become even more deadlier as the days go by. The number now of press workers that have been killed since October the 7th, 2023, is moving closer to the 300 mark. The statistics tell you everything. This is the one conflict, war, whatever you want to call it, but to many now, it is seemingly that, a genocide, where media workers have been killed at a mass level. Joining me now from Amman in Jordan, I'd like to welcome Sara Qudah, who is the Regional Director for the Committee to Protect Journalists in the Middle East and North African region. Sara, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sara, as we were preparing, and I know we've been having these discussions, I don't think both you and I could have imagined 4 more of our colleagues being murdered today. I just wanted to get the CPJ's reaction to what we saw earlier today.
To be honest, there are no more words to describe how do we feel about this. You said that what's happening in Gaza has been the deadliest for journalists in the history. But I just want to flag that August has been among the deadliest, because just in less than 3 weeks, we have at least 10 journalists who has been killed. Some of them were threatened, targeted, and murdered last week. And today we wake up on the news of at least 4 journalists, because we also are investigating in other cases for journalists who has been injured, and we're hoping that they will be okay. Our reaction that this must stop, and there has to be an end for the unlawful killing of journalists in Gaza. Journalists are civilians. They must be protected by the international law, and Israel must adhere to these international laws.
Sara, how much, and we're going to go to back 2 weeks ago, because this, I think, shook the whole core here in South Africa, especially amongst many of my media colleagues. But from the CPJ's perspective, from the entire Middle East, the murder of Anas al-Sharif and his colleagues, how much did that murder really shake the core of how Israel is deliberately attacking the press?
To be honest, the killing of Anas al-Sharif was horrifying for us, because it was a proof that Israel is allowed to threaten journalists, target them and kill them, and to really say that we targeted this person and we killed him with full impunity. And this is very dangerous, because it's not only dangerous for Gaza or for the Middle East, it's dangerous for every single journalist working in conflict and war zones, because you are giving an indication that you can accuse any journalist with false accusations or with accusations without providing any proof, and then kill them with a justification that they were terrorists, and you did not provide any kind of justification. So this is a systematic pattern that we have been seeing in Gaza, and at CPJ, we are worried that this pattern becomes the norm. And this is not something that we should lightly deal with or accept.
Sara, I want to touch on how CPJ conducted its investigation into the evidence that journalists are being deliberately targeted by the Israeli military, including that of human rights reports.
So there are several levels of our investigation. First of all, we do our own in-house investigation through our correspondents, our researchers who do evaluate the situation on the ground. They do interviews, but we also receive the footages and the films from other journalists, and we try to analyze them to see if there was a targeting or not. Another factor that we put into the equation is when a journalist is smeared. So when a journalist is being harassed and smeared on social media by IDF or officials and then deliberately killed. This is a murder. This is a targeted killing, not just a casualty or this journalist being around the area that was airstriked. So this is how we try to determine if the killing of one journalist is a murder or he has or she has been killed.
Sara, one would have suggested that when Anas was killed, along with his colleagues, that Israel would have said, okay, we're going to do an investigation. This may have been, and they've used this quite a lot during the genocide in Gaza, an error. They've used the word error a lot. But Israel admitted to killing Anas and his colleagues, and of course they use the rhetoric which has been used quite a lot during this genocide, that they are quote-unquote agents of Hamas. What does this say about the deliberate killing by Israel on media workers?
Honestly, it's heartbreaking to see that they do that and they do not shy away from the facts. They do admit that they targeted this journalist and they killed him. What that says is Israel is no one is being able to stop Israel and to force them to adhere to the international law and to provide evidence for any claims that they are saying about Anas al-Sharif or the other journalists who has been targeted and killed in the past 22 months. This is something that can lead to full impunity, where governments and militaries can kill journalists and provide accusations that are not tangible, with no solid proof, and get away with this murder.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Sara Qudah. We're going to ask the question, when will the accountability phase for Israel begin? What will it take for them to be held accountable for the murder of press workers? If you look back to 2022, after the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh, quite seemingly, Israel's strongest ally, the United States of America, has just put this one side and said, move on. We're going to have that conversation after the break. Welcome back to News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Of course, with the news of the 4 journalists that were murdered today by Israel in the Gaza Strip, the question that is being asked is, what will it take for the accountability of Israel to occur with regards to the killing of press workers? My guest is Sara Qudah. She is the Regional Director for the Middle East and North African region for the Committee to Protect Journalists. Again, Sara, thank you so much for staying with us. I wanted to ask, with regards to the cases where the CPJ has requested independent or international investigations into journalist killings in Gaza. If so, what has been the response to this?
To be honest, we have 26 cases of confirmed journalists who has been targeted and murdered, and we do continue our work to ask for accountability and for the investigation. This is work in progress. Not much public details can be shared, but what I can say is that CPJ is trying its best to accomplish justice for the victims and their families, and to the entire media and journalist community in the entire world, because this is an attack on everyone, not just one single journalist. What I also want to add is that we do have the international law, and the problem is not about the tools and the mechanisms. The mechanisms are there. The problem is, how can we enforce this law on Israel, and how can we push them to abide to these laws? I think that this is something that is way beyond one organization effort. It needs to be done also by governments, by world leaders who need to stand up against Israel and say that we need investigations, we need accountability and we need justice.
Sara, you mentioned under international law, journalists are protected civilians. It's there for
Yes.
all to see. Yeah, I'd like to think Israel knows it themselves also. How badly has Israel violated this part of international law? I ask this because they violated practically every international law that is out there. Of course, the two ICJ rulings that were given last year has been violated also. But this one of the journalist has really been taken to a whole new level. Talk to us about that.
So I think that the numbers, the footages that we are seeing coming from Gaza, they speak to themselves, and they prove the huge violations that Israel is committing to the international law. I think that what we are seeing in Gaza is a genocide against the entire population of civilians in Gaza. And this is not a claim done by NGOs or activists. These are words that were used by the UN, the Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, where they are confirming that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. The starvation that is happening in Gaza is famine, and journalists, being civilians, they are facing what their communities are facing. So we are not disconnecting journalists from their communities, because by the international law, as long as this journalist is not fighting, is not threatening any other civilian, they are civilians and should be protected by the international law. Is Israel doing that? They are not. Are they respecting the international law? They are not. Is there any other government or leader in the world stopping them? We have not seen any tangible actions until this moment.
Well, to add to that also, Sara, when you have an Israeli military report leaking that 83% of those who had been killed during this genocide in Gaza are civilians, if it's an Israeli military report, then I think that just shows you how bad this genocide has been. Sara, when Israel completely refuses international media into Gaza, and it's been quite clear there. We saw, of course, a few weeks ago where a BBC report showed the extent of Beit Lahia, the destruction of Beit Lahia from the ground. They could only do that, of course, because they were not allowed on the ground. Even now, no international media is on the ground. Of course, we had to rely on Al Jazeera and various other Middle Eastern media outlets. What does that speak of the Israeli government in Tel Aviv pushing for complete silence across the breadth of this genocide?
Plain and simple, they are trying to hide the truth and what's happening inside Gaza, and they are trying to silence the witness. This is what Israel is trying to do in the past 22 months. And if you look at the journalists who has been targeted and killed, they were all prominent journalists who were actively documenting what's happening in Gaza and proving Israel's allegations wrong. Anas al-Sharif, when he was targeted and killed, before that he was one of the first journalists who documented starvation in Gaza, documented civilians being killed when they go to collect their humanitarian aid, schools and hospitals being targeted and striked, where the majority of schools and hospitals, not the majority, 100% of the people who are inside the hospitals are civilians, whether they were doctors, nurses, patients, families of the patients, and journalists. So it's plain simple that what they are trying to do is killing, silencing the witnesses, and hiding the truth.
Sara, I want to add to that because you spoke of prominent, and what we have been seeing now is when Israel wants to go ahead and degrade any media practitioner, and I'm not just talking about in Gaza, because I'm going to get to that in a bit, they are labeled as agents of Hamas, which is laughable but quite sad at the same time. You even see that happening with Piers Morgan. The moment Piers Morgan goes ahead and toes the line in terms of a pro-Palestine narrative, And he's probably one of those who have been quite vocal against the Palestinian side of the story. He's been labeled a quote-unquote agent of Hamas or siding with Hamas. Sara, that narrative from Israel, it's become stale, hasn't it? It's become quite disgusting, hasn't it? Especially at a time where journalism needs to be protected.
To be honest, it's very ironic and it's very dangerous at the same time. I wouldn't use the word sad because it's not sad, it's dangerous. And ironic because they are labeling anyone who's trying to expose the truth or have a different opinion than what they want the narrative to be. They would immediately smear them as terrorists, Hamas agents, against Israel, and all of these big words that they keep using. Just 2 weeks ago or less, an Israeli magazine published a report about the smearing campaigns and saying how Israel or the IDF, they had a cell that is dedicated to smear journalists. And so basically, the majority of the smeared journalists were Gazans and Palestinians. But also, we've seen journalists, Israeli journalists, American journalists, other Arab journalists who are being smeared and harassed on social media, being called names because they are trying to expose the truth, or they are saying that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide, a war, attack on press freedom. No matter how strong or weak the words you are trying to use, they will attack you. And this is not only happening to journalists, it's happening also to those who are working with organizations, with international organizations and the United Nations. We've seen a lot of smear campaigns against those who are trying to protect the truth and speak up about what's happening in Gaza.
Sara, both you and I being media practitioners, we've been taught this in journalism school that the core principle, probably the core principle of journalism, is telling both sides of the story. And I think since the start of the genocide, it's been asked or incumbent of us to go ahead and do that. But when you see what Israel has done for the last 22 months, and I want to go even before that, the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh, when they did it with the impunity that they practice, how difficult have they made it for themselves to tell not only their side of the story, but give airtime to many Israeli officials, given not just the scale of this genocide, but also the mass murder of journalists, which we are seeing right now?
100%, but I just want to make sure that what is happening now through the past 22 months and what was happening before are two different scenarios. So we can't compare them to each other. In the past 22 months, did Israel give anyone a chance to work on the two sides of the stories? It was only one side. Let's be honest. Let's look at the facts. It was one-sided war where Israel is attacking civilians, journalists, medical workers, and killing them, destroying schools, destroying hospitals. It's happening on Palestinian ground where the civilians are only Palestinians. So where is the other side of the story?
Sara, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Sara Qudah. She is the Regional Director for the Committee to Protect Journalists in the Middle East and North African region. As of course we remember Hussam al-Masri, Mohammed Salama, Maryam Abu Daka, and Muaz Abu Taha, more of our colleagues that have been killed just doing their work. We saw within that, while there was a live report, an explosion, a bomb from Israel occurring. We ask ourselves this question: when will the line be drawn in terms of Israel's continuous murder of media practitioners? They are protected under international law. And quite frankly, the Israeli government couldn't care less when it comes to that. That's all we have for you here on News in Focus. If you've missed today's episode, it will be available on our YouTube channel. From myself, Ross Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.